The moment Amarachi unlocked the front door of her home, a wave of sour, stale air hit her nostrils, alcohol, body spray, and sweat. It wasn't the scent of homecoming she had imagined for months. Her suitcase, barely rolled inside, stayed by the door as her eyes scanned the chaos before her. Discarded bottles, wrappers, tangled wigs, and a broken heel littered the floor. The once serene living room, decorated with her careful hands, now looked like a strip club after closing time. Her heart squeezed in confusion. Where was Chike? Was there a burglary? But then she noticed the ashtray, one she never allowed, full of lipstick-stained cigarette butts. Slowly, silently, she dropped her bag and began cleaning. Not because she wanted to, but because her body had learned to fix messes without question. As she wiped spilled drink from the center table, a loud knock startled her. Before she could answer, the door swung open and a tall, curvy woman strutted in, her heels echoing against the tiled floor. "Where's Chike?" she demanded without greeting. Amarachi blinked in confusion. "Sorry, who are you?" The woman squinted at her, smirked, and crossed her arms. "You're the maid? This place is still dirty. And now you're asking me questions." Amarachi frowned, standing up straight. "I'm not a maid. I live here. Before she could finish, a hot slap landed across her cheek. The sting was instant, not just on her face, but in her soul. Her body froze, lips trembling. "Don't you ever raise your voice at me," the woman snapped. "Rubbish maid." The door creaked again. Chike walked in, fresh from the gym, earphones still hanging from his neck. His eyes widened at the sight, not because his wife was home, not because his mistress had just assaulted her, but because Amarachi's presence disrupted his plans. "Amara? What the hell are you doing here?" Amarachi, holding her cheek, turned slowly. My project ended early. I wanted to surprise." Chike cut her off. "You didn't even think to inform me? You just barged in? What were you hoping to catch? Your conscience isn't clean either, I know it." Amarachi staggered back, eyes wide in disbelief. "What?" He pointed accusingly. "Don't act innocent. A woman who sneaks in without warning has secrets. I've been calling you sometimes, and you don't answer. Are you the only one allowed to work?" Amarachi's voice broke. "I called every night." Chike scoffed. "You're being dramatic. Clean yourself up, please. You embarrassed everyone." And just like that, the husband she had missed and prayed for stood beside the woman who slapped her. Amarachi sat in the guest room that night, curled into herself like a child abandoned on a rainy street. Her cheek still burned from Gozi's slap, but the wound inside hurt far deeper. The man she had sacrificed everything for, the man who once knelt to beg her for marriage, who cried when she stood by him during his lowest, had watched her get assaulted and said nothing. Not even an ounce of anger. Not even a whisper of concern. She stared blankly at the walls, trying to remember when things changed. Was it the distance? The silence? Or had he always been this man, hiding behind romantic words and false promises? The longer she stared into the night, the more her memory unlocked fragments she had buried deep. They had met 10 years earlier, when Chike was nothing more than a struggling marketer hopping buses and borrowing suits. Amarachi, already working as an HR assistant, saw something in him, not charm, but potential. She had offered him food on days he came to the office hungry, lent him her laptop when his crashed, and even gave him money from her salary when his mother fell sick. It wasn't charity. It was love. They'd built from nothing, moved from one bedroom to a modest flat, from borrowing to saving. Amarachi believed in building a man, but she hadn't known she was also building her own heartbreak. When he finally got promoted to a regional sales head, it was her that updated his CV, wrote his application letter, and prayed through vigils while he slept beside her. Now, the same man had reduced her to a stranger in her own home. As she curled tighter, her mind replayed their late-night calls during her work posting in Abuja. "I miss you," she had whispered one night, cheeks warm under the moonlight. "I sleep with your shirt just to feel close." And he had replied, "I miss you too, my queen. When you come back, I'll surprise you with roses." Amarachi closed her eyes in pain. The only surprise she got was a slap from another woman. The shame didn't come from what Ngozi did. It came from what Chike didn't do. She had become invisible, a maid in her own marriage. But inside that silent heartbreak, something started to shift. Her tears began to dry. Her fingers clenched. Amarachi wasn't just hurt. She was waking up. While Amarachi had packed her bags 6 months ago with excitement and longing, Chike had already begun transitioning into a different version of himself. The moment the door closed behind her that morning she left for Abuja, he returned to the bedroom and stretched with a smile. Freedom. He didn't tell anyone at work that he was married. Not the new interns. Not the regional manager. Not even his office bestie, who constantly flirted with him. Me? Married? He had joked during one happy hour outing. No, I'm not ready to die early. The laughter from his colleagues only boosted his ego. From that point, the wedding ring stayed in his drawer, only worn during video calls with Amarachi. And every call was followed by a kiss from a different woman. Chike's job gave him influence. As head of sales and operations, he held interviews, approved contracts, and supervised junior staff. He began to use his position as leverage, sometimes subtle, sometimes direct. When Ada, a young NYSC intern, arrived, he offered her a ride home in his air-conditioned Camry. One lift became two. Two became dinners. Dinners became hotel nights. And all the while he answered Amarachi's calls with "Yes, baby, I love you too. And I'm alone at home missing you." He never mentioned Ngozi. He never mentioned the office parties. He never mentioned the times his bed didn't stay empty. The only thing he mentioned was how lonely it was at home, a tactic that made Amarachi feel guilty for pursuing her career. Ngozi entered the picture like fire in dry grass. Unlike the quiet ones before her, she was bold, demanding, and walked around like she owned everything. She met Chike at a company event and pursued him aggressively. When she visited his home for the first time and noticed the framed wedding photo slightly hidden behind books, she laughed. "That's your cousin?" Chike paused for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, my cousin's wedding. I don't even talk to her again." From that moment, the lie became cemented. Ngozi began coming over more often. She criticized the part-time maid, mocked the decor Amarachi carefully chose, and eventually started sleeping over. Chike allowed it. No questions. No guilt. He told himself Amarachi would understand. After all, she left him alone. What did she expect? In the eyes of his colleagues, Chike was charismatic, confident, and dangerously flirtatious. He had mastered the art of praise and performance. He complimented female staff stresses, held unnecessary one-on-one meetings, and created bonding moments after work. He positioned himself as the man every woman could talk to, yet the one no one could fully have. With Amarachi away, he felt untouchable. His wedding ring gathered dust in a drawer while his heart danced with lust. He took advantage of power imbalances, buying lunch for interns, giving special shifts to pretty marketers, even massaging the shoulders of tired ladies during Friday meetings like he was a caring boss. The boundaries blurred quickly. He never forced anyone, but he always made it clear that rewards came with proximity, and women, young and vulnerable, fell for it. The office corridors whispered about him, but no one dared speak out. One cleaner joked that Chike's corner office had become a honeymoon suite, but she said it quietly, behind the locker room walls. His reputation among the men in the company split opinions. Some admired him, others envied him. His team delivered just enough results to keep management quiet, and because he looked good in suits, held meetings confidently, and rarely raised his voice, HR saw no reason to investigate the rumors that trickled in. Meanwhile, he kept Ngozi entertained with fancy lunch dates, shopping sprees, and house keys. She was the only woman who acted like his equal. Unlike others, she didn't pretend to be shy. She walked boldly into his life like she owned a stake in it. And Chike liked that. He had grown addicted to her defiance, her confidence, and her ability to challenge him without fear. But while he chased skirts during office hours and fell into bed with Ngozi afterward, Amarachi remained faithful, disciplined, and excited about their future. She shared pictures of her project reports, asked about his meals, and sent him airtime when his own account ran low, unaware that the credit she sent often ended up topping up Ngozi's line. Chaik's duplicity ran so deep that he began to believe it himself, that he deserved happiness, that Amarachi was too focused on her career, and that Ngozi made him feel alive. But his house, which used to smell of home-cooked meals and soft gospel music, now reeked of perfumes he couldn't pronounce, mixed with secrets too dirty to confess. The man who once begged Amarachi to believe in his dreams had become a predator, wearing perfume and privilege. And the world that once lifted him was quietly waiting for him to fall. Amarachi's evenings in Abuja were often lonely but hopeful. She worked long hours on her construction project site, managed subcontractors, battled heat and exhaustion. But every night, she carved out time to talk to Chaik. It was her highlight. Sometimes she'd video call and sit with him virtually as they watched TV together. Other times she sent him romantic messages during lunch breaks, teasing him about what she would cook when she returned. Her heart was tethered to a version of him that still made her laugh, the man who once cried in her arms when his brother mocked his joblessness. She believed that their time apart was temporary, that they would grow stronger through it, and that her sacrifices were building something real. She saw their marriage as a long-term investment. Chaik saw it as a short-term limitation. Most nights, Chaik would answer her call with smooth ease, lying on the bed beside another woman while using his other hand to press accept. He'd lower his voice, smile, and whisper, "I miss you, baby." Sometimes he would even walk into the bathroom and pretend the water was running to fake background noise while Ngozi lay in bed, scrolling through his phone, mocking the woman who abandoned her husband for work. Chaik often muttered lies like a rehearsed script. "I've been eating noodles." "Oh, you know I can't cook." Amarachi would giggle, her heart softening. Meanwhile, the kitchen downstairs had Ngozi's leftover jollof rice, still warm in the microwave. The duality didn't bother Chaik. He felt entitled. Amarachi gave him stability, but Ngozi gave him fire. Over time, Amarachi started noticing cracks. Once, she tried calling him around 10 p.m., but his line was switched off. He messaged the next day, "I slept early. I was exhausted." Another time, she heard music in the background during their call, a song she didn't recognize as part of their playlist, and when she asked, he said, "Oh, it's the neighbor. They're watching a movie too loud." But the truth was simple. He had just finished dancing with Ngozi in his living room, both half drunk from rum and excited for what came next. Amarachi wanted to believe him. Every time doubt crept in, she pushed it aside with hope. "He's just tired. He's not good at managing loneliness," she would tell herself. But deep in her bones, a quiet unease had begun to stir. A whisper she didn't want to hear. Something isn't right at home. Ngozi never saw herself as a side chick. From the first time she laid eyes on Chaik's house, she knew she would plant her flag there. His taste in decor told her everything. A man who had climbed out of poverty and now craved recognition. His leather chairs were still covered in plastic. His TV was bigger than necessary. The place screamed new money, and she loved it. At first, she asked subtle questions. Who arranged these curtains? This photo frame? Who is this woman? But when Chaik brushed them off, she took it as a green light. In her mind, there was no wife. Or if there was, she didn't matter. Ngozi began staying over more frequently, leaving clothes behind, adjusting furniture, and even yelling at the part-time maid for using the wrong mop. She wasn't just visiting. She was taking over. Chaik, blinded by lust and ego, didn't stop her. When she snapped at the maid for not wiping the tiles properly, he laughed. When she reorganized Amarachi's pantry and removed all her herbal teas, he didn't blink. When she threw Amarachi's favorite tablecloth in the trash, calling it old woman fabric, Chaik shrugged. Ngozi's dominance grew like a weed in dry soil, unchallenged and wild. She invited her friends over, hosted drinking games, and even brought her small dog to spend weekends. One Sunday, as gospel music played faintly from Amarachi's saved Spotify list, Ngozi barked, a beg change that church nonsense. Put something sexy. Chaik obeyed. He didn't even feel guilt anymore. His house had become a stage, and Ngozi played lead actress, while Amarachi's role had been silently retired. Even when neighbors asked questions, "Where is your wife now?" Chike laughed it off. "Ah, she's doing some work training, oh. But I day all right here, Jer." Ngozi wasn't blind. She noticed he avoided mentioning the word wife, even when drunk. That told her everything she needed to know. Amarachi had been demoted. And if Amarachi didn't claim her place, then it was up for grabs. Ngozi started referring to the house as our home in conversations with friends. My man this, my man that. She called Chike's parents less often, but flaunted his money on social media. Hashtag spoiled queen, hashtag soft life only. Her captions read, while Amarachi, far away, worked late into the night, clueless that her home was now a battleground she didn't know she was losing. But the war wasn't over. Amarachi just hadn't started fighting back yet. It was the night before Amarachi returned, the final stroke in a long string of Chike's moral collapse. Ngozi had planned a Friday night bash, inviting her friends from her Instagram soft life circle. The living room, once a peaceful sanctuary decorated with modest elegance, had become a neon jungle. LED strip lights bathed the walls in pink and purple. The once cream rug was now stained with wine. Laughter, music, and the smell of grilled suya filled the air. Ngozi danced in the center of the room, barefoot, wearing Chike's oversized shirt and nothing underneath, proud to mark her territory. Women in revealing outfits occupied the couch, some of whom Chike had flirted with before. Beer bottles clinked, joints passed around. The TV blasted music videos that Amarachi would have muted for their vulgarity. But she wasn't there to protest. And Chike? He was at the bar counter pouring drinks, basking in his self-made freedom. There was no guilt in him that night, only pride. He liked the attention, the way the women laughed too loud at his jokes and praised his generous spirit. In between drinks, he whispered suggestive things to Ngozi, kissed her openly, and spoke about future plans that Amarachi should have been part of. His phone rang once, Amarachi, but he declined the call and muttered, "She'll understand," before putting his phone on silent. Ngozi saw the name flash on the screen. "That's her again, right?" she asked. Chike nodded with a smirk, persistent as usual. Ngozi laughed, loud and confident. "Soon, she'll learn to stay gone." They toasted to that like they were plotting a takeover, which, in many ways, they were. By midnight, strangers were asleep on the rug. The sink overflowed with dirty cups, and a pair of panties hung lazily on the dining chair. Amarachi's framed wedding photo had been turned to face the wall. Her home had become a shrine of disgrace. Meanwhile, in Abuja, Amarachi was packing her bag. Her heart raced with joy as she folded Chike's favorite Ankara shirt she had bought for him and the native wrapper she planned to wear to surprise him. She smiled at the gift box tucked in her bag, a gold wristwatch she saved for months to buy. It was her way of saying thank you for waiting. She even texted him again, "I love you. Can't wait to hold you soon." No reply. She thought nothing of it. He must have been asleep, she told herself. In her innocence, she imagined their reunion, how he would lift her up, spin her around, maybe even cry tears of joy. She didn't know that as she zipped her bag with trembling excitement, another woman was sleeping in her bed. The party was over. The house was trashed. And the home she was returning to didn't exist anymore. The morning sun over Abuja rose with hope for Amarachi. Her leave was officially approved, and she took it as a divine sign. She was proud of what she had accomplished on-site, having led one of the most successful phases of the company's estate development project. Her bosses praised her dedication, and some even teased, "You must really love your husband. Oh, you haven't stopped smiling all week." They didn't know that her mind had been with Chike the whole time, replaying their old memories, planning their reunion, and imagining his embrace. Amarachi packed quickly, sent her project files to HR, and caught the earliest bus. She was too excited to rest. She rehearsed in her mind how she would jump on him and yell, "Surprise." Maybe they would even go out that night or stay in, cook together, watch a movie. She had no idea what waited at the end of the road. When Amarachi arrived at their estate, the sun was already dipping. She stood before the gate with her small luggage in one hand and her heart pounding. She didn't call ahead. She wanted the moment to be magical. As the gate swung open, A strange unease prickled her skin. The compound looked messy. Trash bags were near the door, and some broken bottles littered a corner. Still, she smiled and wheeled her bag inside. The door was unlocked. She opened it gently, expecting the smell of home, but was greeted by the foul stench of dried alcohol and sweat. The sight before her stopped her in her tracks. Clothes scattered on the couch, used condoms near the flower vase, wigs on the floor. Her eyes scanned the room with disbelief. What happened here? Had he been robbed? Drugged? Was he safe? She dropped her bag and began tidying like muscle memory. She folded throw pillows, cleared the wrappers, gathered broken glass. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe Chike had some reckless friends over. Her mind was desperate to believe anything but the truth. She cleaned for hours until the house started to resemble something familiar again. She hadn't even changed out of her travel clothes when Ngozi barged in, phone in hand, demanding for her man. Amarachi looked up, confused and sweaty, and asked, "Who are you looking for?" Ngozi's eyes narrowed. So the maid is talking back now. Amarachi straightened up. "This is my house," but the sentence didn't finish. The slap came fast, hot, and final. Amarachi staggered, holding her face, shocked beyond words. That was when Chike walked in, gym bag in hand, earbuds still dangling, and saw the scene. Amarachi's soul was ready to hear him say, "What's going on here? Are you okay?" But all he said was, "Why are you here without telling me first?" And her heart cracked open. Amarachi stood frozen in the same position long after the slap had landed. It wasn't just the pain, though her cheek throbbed. It was the humiliation, the betrayal, the sheer absurdity of it all. This was her house. Her sweat had paid half the mortgage. Her fingerprints were on every item in the living room. And yet, a stranger had slapped her like a servant. And worse, her husband said nothing to defend her. Instead, Chike's tone shifted into irritation. "You should have at least informed me. You can't just show up like this, Amara. What if I wasn't around?" Ngozi, still fuming, folded her arms and hissed loudly, "If this is your maid, you better train her well." Amarachi's lips trembled. She looked at Chike, praying he would correct the insult. But he turned his back and walked into the bedroom like it was just another day. That night, Amarachi didn't sleep in her bed. She took her bag and quietly moved into the guest room. Her eyes remained open for hours, fixed on the ceiling, but her mind was buried in memories. The wedding vows, the nights they prayed together, the days they fasted for his promotion. Was it all a lie? She couldn't cry. Her body refused. The pain had gone beyond tears. She lay still as Chike made love to Ngozi in the next room, her own bedroom, the moans loud and intentional. Every sound was a knife twisting deeper into her chest. Amarachi finally rose around 3 a.m. and walked to the bathroom. As she looked into the mirror, the woman staring back at her was different. The tears still refused to fall, but something else did, a shift in her spirit. She whispered to herself, "They think I'm a maid? Let me teach them what a real madam does." By morning, she had packed her bag and left. No goodbye. No drama. Just silence. But silence in Amarachi's hands was dangerous. She didn't rush to expose them. She didn't scream on social media. She didn't run to her family crying. She disappeared. And in her disappearance, she began to gather, not evidence, but power. Behind the scenes, she reconnected with old colleagues, re-established her networks, and tapped into connections Chike never knew she had. While he remained in lustful ignorance, Amarachi was planting the seeds of a quiet war. One that wouldn't just hurt, it would humiliate. And it all started with a slap in her own home. She may have walked out broken, but when she returned, they would kneel. Amarachi's exit from the house was quiet, but it shook the very core of her spirit. She walked out with a calmness that could only be born from deep, violent disappointment. She didn't argue. She didn't curse. She didn't even try to explain herself. She just picked her bag, walked past the maid, who looked at her with shame in her eyes, and didn't look back. As the gate shut behind her, something in her heart shut too. Not just the part that loved Chike, but the part that ever saw herself as small. It wasn't the slap that ended things. It was the look in Chaik's eyes, blank, defensive, and devoid of remorse. A man who could watch his wife get slapped and blame her for being too secretive was no longer a husband. He was an enemy in a lover's skin. Amarachi checked into a quiet guest house and turned off her phone. She wasn't ready to explain to anyone what had just happened. Not to her mother, not to her best friend Neka, and certainly not to her boss, who had written her a glowing recommendation just before she left. She stared at the ceiling fan that night, watching it rotate like her thoughts, round and round, going nowhere. The pain wasn't even loud anymore. It was subtle, like the ache that comes after the scream. But beneath that silence, a new version of Amarachi was forming. One that no longer begged to be loved. One that didn't believe in suffering quietly for marriage. One that had tasted betrayal in its rawest form and refused to let it define her. She would not make noise. She would not react. She would rebuild, slowly, smartly, strategically. The next morning, she walked into a salon and cut her hair. Clean, short, bold. It shocked even the stylist. She stared at herself in the mirror and smiled faintly. The woman who looked back wasn't weak. She was reborn. Amarachi began reaching out to her old clients and senior colleagues discreetly. She told them she had returned earlier than planned and was open to consultancy roles. The responses were overwhelming. Offers poured in from people who had always admired her integrity, her work ethic, and her leadership skills. It didn't take long before she started earning again. Her calendar filled up quickly with strategy sessions, brand audits, and project pitches. Meanwhile, Chaik had no idea she was even back in town. To him, she had vanished, and he preferred it that way. He believed he had finally freed himself from the wife he once praised as his destiny helper. But destiny, he would soon learn, is not something you abandon without consequences. By now, Chaik had grown bolder in his workplace antics. Without Amarachi's emotional presence or moral compass, there was nothing left to balance him. He walked through the office halls with the confidence of a man who thought he had it all: career, car, charisma, and women. But what he didn't realize was that he had become a spider in his own web, spinning threads of seduction, manipulation, and short-lived satisfaction. Every female staff member who walked through his department was a potential conquest. Some resisted and got transferred. Some gave in and were later discarded like wrappers after chewing gum. Chaik didn't see human beings anymore, only egos to feed and bodies to enjoy. His eyes, once full of hunger to succeed, were now full of lust. His mind, once sharp with strategy, now fogged with fantasies. The whispers had begun. They floated through boardrooms, bounced around office, WhatsApp groups, and lingered at water dispensers. That's the man who changed secretaries 4 times in 6 months. Don't sit too close during meetings unless you want trouble. I heard Ngozi came to the office and caused a scene. The HR manager, a woman who had once admired Chaik's growth, began documenting complaints. Anonymous emails, subtle complaints, even photos started accumulating. But Chaik was too distracted to notice. He was too busy planning Ngozi's birthday party, a private event where he intended to propose. Yes, propose. The woman who slapped his wife had now convinced him she was the one who truly understood him. Ngozi was playing a dangerous game, but she was good at it. She played victim, seductress, and supporter all at once. She even began suggesting she should handle some of his accounts, not because she was qualified, but to tighten her grip. Meanwhile, Chaik's performance began to slide. Deadlines were missed. Clients started complaining. Reports were late. But he covered it up with smooth lies and flashy suits. Whenever a team member voiced concern, he'd joke, "Relax. I've got this." But the truth was, Chaik was spiraling. Amarachi had been the backbone of his structure, reminding him of invoices, proofreading his reports, motivating him before presentations. Without her, he was a body without bones, still standing, but barely. Yet his pride wouldn't let him reach out. Instead, he doubled down on bad behavior, believing that charm would shield him. He couldn't see that the web he was spinning had a center, and he was the one stuck in it. Ngozi's power over Chaik had moved from flirtation to domination. She no longer asked for permission to stay over. She simply stayed. She no longer suggested meals. She ordered them. She even began collecting rent from tenants in the mini-flat at the back of Chaik's compound without his knowledge. To her, the house wasn't his anymore. It was theirs. She had become the self-declared madam of the house, and Chaik, lost in desire and delusion, let her. He was too busy trying to maintain his image as a boss at work and a provider at home. Ngozi, meanwhile, was making calls behind his back. Calls to men who specialized in fake robberies. Calls to loan sharks. Calls to former clients of hers who still owed her favors. She was planning an exit, and like most con artists, she wanted to leave with more than she came with. Her plan was simple. Stage a robbery, clear out cash, jewelry, and any sensitive documents that could be sold or used for blackmail. And then vanish. The warning signs were there. Chaik just didn't want to see them. She began locking doors he never locked. She became secretive with her calls. She started asking weird questions about his savings, passwords, business licenses. But Chaik, drunk on her attention, ignored all of it. One night, he even gave her his bank token while half asleep, thinking she just wanted to buy data. Ngozi smiled in the dark, holding the token like a key to a kingdom. She was almost ready. But before she could execute the final move, Amarachi's return would shake the entire board. In those final days before the fake robbery, Chaik was at his most relaxed, which meant he was at his most vulnerable. He didn't realize that his account had been emptied of nearly 3 million Nigerian nairas until his debit card declined at a restaurant. When he returned home that day, Ngozi was gone. So were the jewelry, his spare car keys, and the sensitive files Amarachi once advised him to keep safe. His house was trashed, not with wine bottles, but with vengeance. There was no note, no call, just an empty wardrobe, a looted bank account, and a sick feeling in his chest. For the first time since Amarachi left, he reached for his wedding ring. It was dusty, but even as he held it in his palm, he knew he had lost the woman who built him and been used by the woman who broke him. Amarachi didn't announce her return. She became it. Like a quiet storm, she re-entered the world of business consulting and corporate project management without noise, without fanfare, and without mercy. The first company she reached out to offered her a remote role immediately, citing her excellent performance in Abuja. But Amarachi declined. She didn't want comfort. She wanted visibility. So she took up a contract with a rival firm to Chaik's employer. She began attending strategy briefings, public panels, and investor roundtables. In rooms where Chaik once bragged she could never enter without his name, Amarachi sat beside CEOs, chaired meetings, and was offered deals Chaik could only dream of. Her elegance was unmatched, shaved hair now shaped into a bold low cut, skin glowing from calm and vengeance, her wardrobe simple but powerful. People noticed. And they remembered her name, even if she no longer introduced it with his. Behind the scenes, Amarachi was also gathering information. She had never been the type to gossip or investigate her husband. Until now. With her calm smile and respected presence, she slowly extracted truths from those who once orbited Chaik's world. A former colleague mentioned casually how Chaik had been skipping deadlines. Another junior staff whispered about Ngozi's multiple appearances at the office. A secretary she had once helped during maternity leave revealed how Chaik boasted openly that his wife was too busy chasing cement and concrete in Abuja, while his real queen was at home. Amarachi took notes, not to act immediately, but to remember everything. She wasn't just rising in the business world. She was becoming a shadow to Chaik's every mistake. He didn't know it, but she had begun to collect the receipts, not to confront him, but to bury him slowly. And then came the offer she couldn't ignore. A friend she once mentored, now the regional director of a bank, invited her to consult on a digital restructure for one of their partner companies. That company was Chaik's company. Amarachi said yes without hesitation. She arrived at the first meeting in an ivory pantsuit, folder in hand, and took her seat across the table. Chaik wasn't in the room. Yet. But he would be soon. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She was no longer the woman who got slapped in her own home. She was the storm that would make them beg. Chike's spiral hit full throttle the day he discovered his house had been emptied. He returned from work expecting to meet Ngozi in the kitchen cooking ogbono soup. Instead, he found silence, chaos, and betrayal. Every drawer had been ransacked. His wristwatches, including the 450,000 Nigerian Nairas Rolex knockoff he used to impress clients, were gone. The safe he once proudly showed Ngozi just for transparency had been broken open. His business documents, including the proposal Amarachi helped him draft 2 years ago, were missing. And Ngozi? Her line was switched off. Her Instagram page had been deleted. Her WhatsApp DP was blank. Her perfume still lingered faintly in the bedroom, taunting him. At first, he tried to stay calm, convincing himself it was a prank or misunderstanding. But when he saw the security footage, Ngozi with 2 strange men loading bags into his car, he dropped to the floor like a rag. The shame was unbearable. He couldn't report her. What would he say? That his side chick he had paraded as his wife-to-be had just robbed him blind? The police would laugh. Worse, his real wife had left him without a word. The only woman who could save his pride, who knew his passwords, his accounts, his mental patterns, had vanished. His ego kept him from calling her. But now his pride was shattered. The house he once used for wild parties was now empty, dusty, and heavy with the stench of karma. His colleagues began to notice a change. His clothes no longer looked crisp. He came late to work. He forgot names, deadlines, numbers. And when asked if Ngozi was okay, he muttered excuses. She traveled. She's with her mom. She's fine. But deep down he knew. She was gone. And Amarachi, the real wife, had become unreachable. In his desperation, he reached out to one of Ngozi's former friends, offering 50,000 Nigerian Nairas for any information. The girl laughed. You think you're the first man she's done this to? Brothers, carry your L in peace. Alone and humiliated, Chike began to drink. Cheap liquor. Bitter liquor. At night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, just like Amarachi once did. But unlike her, he had no strength to rise. The woman he mocked had turned into a ghost he couldn't stop dreaming about. She haunted him, not with words, but with silence. She hadn't even posted online. No rants. No quotes. No shady statuses. She had simply disappeared, and that scared him more than anything. Because silence is what you hear right before thunder strikes. It wasn't long before the whispers in the office turned into statements. He's not the same anymore. Chike is losing it. What happened to him? His aura of control began to crumble. Once confident and sharp, he now fumbled with presentations, misquoted figures, and stammered during meetings. Even the interns he once seduced avoided him. Nobody wanted to be tied to a falling man. His direct manager sent him a warning letter for missing 3 client follow-ups in 2 weeks. Chike blamed family issues, but everyone knew that was code for, my sins are catching up with me. He had become the office cautionary tale. The same man who used to organize Friday hangouts now sat alone at lunch, sipping lukewarm water, and scrolling through old photos of Ngozi and Amarachi. His friends, too, began to disappear. The men who hailed him during wild parties stopped calling. Some had secretly admired Amarachi and saw her departure as Chike's downfall. You day craze, one former colleague told him bluntly in a bar. How you take lose that kind woman? Because of waist and lipstick. That night, Chike got drunk and stumbled home, only to realize the generator was faulty, the lights off, and the fridge empty. He slept on the couch because the bed reminded him of 2 women, one who slapped his wife, and one who used to pray over his dreams. The silence in the house became a mirror, reflecting everything he had destroyed. He tried to call Amarachi. The line rang once, then went dead. She had blocked him. Even his mother stopped defending him. After Amarachi quietly sent her a respectful message explaining the separation, the old woman called Chike and wept bitterly. Now this girl way suffer with you. This same girl way clean my wounds after surgery. Now she you disgrace like this? Chike couldn't reply. He hung up and smashed the phone against the wall. For the first time, he saw himself not as a man who made a mistake, but as a man who became a mistake. His house no longer felt like a home. The mirrors haunted him. His suits mocked him. His ring, long forgotten, now sat in his drawer like a relic from a better past. He was abandoned. By his mistress. By his friends. By his mother. And worst of all, by the only woman who had ever truly loved him. And now she was rising. Amarachi's reappearance in public wasn't announced. It was felt. She arrived at the prestigious Lagos Leadership and Investment Summit in a tailored navy blue suit, heels clicking with authority, her low-cut hair perfectly shaped, her face bare but radiant. When she entered the room, people looked twice. Not because she tried to attract attention, but because everything about her now demanded respect. Her silence had made her mysterious, but her presence made her unforgettable. As she walked to the stage to sit among the lead panelists, all male CEOs, murmurs spread. That's the woman who handled the federal housing project in Abuja. Didn't she used to be married to that Chike guy? She looks unbothered. And unbothered she was. Amarachi had built herself back brick by brick. Her scars had healed into armor, and her pain had turned into poise. The most poetic part? The company she was consulting for, the one that brought her to this summit, was a direct competitor of Chike's firm. And the person who introduced her to that opportunity was someone Chike had once mocked for being too soft to survive the business world. Karma didn't knock this time. It marched through the front door, wearing heels. After the panel, Amarachi didn't linger. She went to her car, a sleek black Prado she had purchased under her registered company, and drove off, waving politely at the cameras. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't address her past. But her silence shouted louder than any scandal ever could. A blogger captured a photo of her stepping out of the event. Within hours, it went viral on social media. The caption read, "From maid to mogul, Amarachi returns like a queen." Even people who didn't know her cheered. Those who did gulped. Back in his office, Chike stared at the photo on his phone like it was a ghost. The same woman he once dismissed as too predictable, the one he allowed another woman to slap in her own home, had returned like royalty. He couldn't stop staring at her face, the sharp cheekbones, the strength in her posture. This wasn't the Amarachi who cried in the guest room. This was a woman who had nothing to prove, because she had already won. Chike held the phone to his chest and let out a long, painful breath. He hadn't felt small in years, not since the days when Amarachi gave him transport money and helped type his CV. But now, he felt microscopic. He wanted to call her, to apologize, to crawl if he had to. But something told him it was too late. Ngozi's downfall was loud, embarrassing, and exactly what she deserved. Amarachi didn't lift a finger herself. She simply handed over the files she had quietly compiled to the right authorities. Bank withdrawals traced to Chike's account. WhatsApp messages. Screenshots. Even CCTV footage from a neighbor's camera showing Ngozi leaving the compound with stolen goods. Amarachi didn't do it for revenge alone. She did it for justice. She had built that home. She had invested in that life. She had been assaulted, humiliated, and erased. Now it was time to take it all back, with class. When Ngozi was picked up at a lounge in Lekki, dressed in a two-piece outfit with a glass of champagne in hand, she didn't even have time to process what was happening. Within minutes, she was in handcuffs, yelling and cursing as onlookers recorded her public disgrace. The video hit Twitter and Instagram almost instantly. Slay Queen busted for robbery and fraud. The hashtag spread like wildfire. People who once toasted with her distanced themselves. She tried to call Chike. He didn't answer. The same man who once called her my queen now ignored her like a disease. Amarachi, however, remained silent. She didn't gloat. She didn't post. She didn't grant interviews. Instead, she sat in her private office, sipping tea, watching the news update on her laptop like it was a Netflix series. When the officer in charge sent her a message saying, "She's in custody, ma," all she replied was, "Thank you." No emojis. No exclamation marks. Just calm. Ngozi had slapped her in her own home. Now she was being paraded in handcuffs, begging, weeping, swearing she was set up. The irony was delicious. For Chaik, it was the final straw. His phone didn't stop buzzing with messages. Old colleagues, clients. Even the building's receptionist asked awkwardly, "Sir, is it true about that woman?" His shame was now public. Everyone knew the mistress he proudly flaunted was not only a thief, but a liar. Amarachi's name was now synonymous with success, while his was rotting in ridicule. He tried to visit Ngozi at the police station, more out of guilt than love, but she spat at him through the bars. "You allowed me to rot while your wife set me up. She used you." Chaik walked away, empty. He didn't defend Amarachi. He didn't defend Ngozi. He had nothing left to defend. His silence had birthed monsters, and now they had eaten him alive. Outside, reporters asked him questions. "Sir, any comment?" He kept walking, head low, spirit crushed. Amarachi hadn't said a word, but somehow she had already spoken. The tears didn't start all at once. They came in drops, unexpected, unwelcome, but unstoppable. Chaik sat on the edge of his bed, the same bed where he once made love to Ngozi, and wept like a child. His clothes were still in the wardrobe, but everything else felt empty. The smell of Amarachi's lavender body lotion had long disappeared. Her soft Ankara pillows were gone. The mirror she once used to apply her lip balm was now broken. His house felt like a haunted museum, filled with memories, yet void of life. He picked up her old journal, one she had left by mistake. In it were pages of dreams, goals they planned together, names of potential children, prayer points they used to share. His fingers trembled as he flipped through them. Amarachi had truly loved him, and he had turned that love into ash. He finally mustered the courage to call her again. This time, the line didn't even ring. She had blocked him completely. Desperate, he used another line, a friend's number. She answered. "Hello." Her voice was calm, direct, unfazed. Chaik's throat dried up. "Amara, it's me." Silence. "Please don't hang up. I'm not calling to fight. I need you to hear me." Amarachi exhaled slowly. "I've heard enough." But he begged. He cried. "I made a mistake. I was stupid. I was weak. I lost myself. I lost you." There was a pause. Then her voice, soft but sharp, sliced through him. "You didn't lose me, Chaik. You threw me away. There's a difference." And with that, she hung up. That was when the real sob started, loud, raw, and violent. He screamed into his pillow like a man who had just buried his own soul. He couldn't go to work the next day. His eyes were swollen. His spirit was broken. He walked into the kitchen and saw the gift Amarachi once brought from Abuja, a mug that read "Forever Mine," now cracked, lying near the sink. The irony crushed him. He sat on the floor, staring at it, and whispered, "I'm sorry." But there was no one to hear it. The walls didn't respond. The house didn't echo. His sorry floated into nothingness, like everything he once took for granted. Amarachi had cried silently once. Now it was his turn to cry, loudly, hopelessly, and all alone. When Amarachi received the formal invite to the business reconciliation and stakeholders dialogue organized by Chaik's crumbling company, she almost laughed. The same company that once ignored her suggestions when she was just the wife was now asking her to attend as a consultant representing one of their biggest competitors. It was poetic. She didn't respond at first, but 2 days later, her assistant forwarded a message from one of the directors begging Amarachi to attend. "We believe your presence will help stabilize investor confidence." That was all she needed to hear. The same institution that once fed Chaik's ego was now depending on her grace to survive. She told her assistant to confirm her attendance. She chose her outfit carefully. A white gown, sleek heels, hair brushed back, simple earrings. She looked like Mercy dressed as elegance. But she came to deliver judgment. The conference hall buzzed when she arrived. Men who once ignored her stood to shake her hand. Women she had never met whispered about her confidence. Chaik was already seated at the front, his face pale when she walked in. He hadn't seen her in person since the call where she told him he didn't lose her. He threw her away. Now seeing her again, in full glory, he shrank inside. She didn't look like a woman scorned. She looked like a woman who had been through fire and came out gold. Amarachi didn't glance at him once. She took her seat. She brought out her notes. When she was introduced to speak, she stood tall and began, "In business, as in relationships, the foundation you build determines your stability. If you build on lies, the collapse is not a matter of if, but when." The hall was silent. Chaik lowered his head. After the panel, a small round table was arranged with key executives, and Chaik was seated beside her. He couldn't speak. He kept staring at the table, his fingers trembling. After the discussions, as the room cleared, he turned to her. "Amara, please." His voice cracked. "Can we talk?" She looked at him for the first time. No anger. No tears. Just power. "You should have spoken when I was your wife. Now you speak as a stranger." Chaik's eyes filled with tears. "I was lost. I miss you. I'm sorry." Amarachi nodded slightly. "I believe you are sorry. But some things can't be repaired." Behind them, a journalist snapped a photo. Chaik with red eyes, Amarachi standing tall, back straight, face calm. That photo would go viral the next morning with the caption, "Wife once mistaken for maid now owns the room her husband cries in." Amarachi never posted her wins. She didn't need to. The world saw it for themselves. Newspapers wrote about her growing consultancy firm. Business blogs quoted her speeches. Her face graced panels and billboards. But she never gave a single interview about what happened between her and Chaik. She didn't talk about the slap. She didn't talk about Ngozi. She didn't speak about the night she left without a word. She let the silence carry the weight. Because silence, when laced with dignity, is louder than any shout. Even her parents were shocked at her transformation. Her father, once worried she had lost her home, now called her Ada M. the Lioness. Her mother wept quietly during a Sunday church service when the pastor praised Amarachi's integrity without knowing the full story. Her siblings watched her in awe. She was no longer just their sister. She had become an example. As for Chaik, he faded. Not financially, he didn't become a beggar, but emotionally, socially, and spiritually. He walked with his head slightly bowed now. The man who once shouted at waiters and dismissed his wife now apologized to gatekeepers. He began to attend church again, this time not to network, but to kneel. But it was too late. He once had a crown, and he threw it away for perfume and pride. Now he watched from the shadows as Amarachi rose, not just as a woman, but as a movement. Her silence exposed him more than any viral video could. At every business event where she spoke, someone would ask, wasn't she the woman whose husband cheated with a slay queen? And another would answer, yes. And now she runs the company he lost. Even people who didn't know her story felt her power. One quiet afternoon, Amarachi visited her old home, now up for rent after Chaik downsized. She didn't go inside. She just stood outside the gate, remembering everything. The laughter, the dreams, the betrayal, the slap. She smiled softly and whispered, "Thank you." Because if she hadn't been humiliated, she wouldn't have been reborn. If she hadn't been slapped, she wouldn't have found her strength. She turned away and entered her car. As she drove off, she passed Chaik walking on the sidewalk in plain clothes. Their eyes met. He froze. She smiled faintly, gave him a nod, not of recognition, but closure, and drove on. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. She had nothing left to prove. After all, they had begged, and she had risen. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.